Hey, it's Andrew here from Home Theatre Engineering. The video you're about to see is a result of quite a few questions we've received with regard to calibration tools, what to look out for in calibration, and a few other things. I just wanted to point out before we got into it that this doesn't in any way cover all of the equipment available for calibration. It doesn't cover all of the software available for calibration. It's merely focused more specifically on the equipment that I've used in the past and that I'm using now, and perhaps what you might see other calibrators using. So I hope you find it interesting, I hope you find it enjoyable, and once more, we look forward to your questions and comments. Thank you.
Hey guys, Enzo here, Andrew here. We are here because I thought we would do a little bit of calibration talk with the master calibrator, Mr. Andrew Poole, who's been calibrating since...
Look, I'm not sure. I think I did my first course in about 1999. I flew to the UK and did a course there with ISF and Sencor and with Jerry LeMay, who and they're all still going strong. So hi to Joel Silver from ISF and Jerry LeMay from the HAA and Tom Schulte from was at Sencor at the time.
So I guess we're going to start right at the basics. ISF, a lot of people go, what does ISF stand for? It's Image Science Foundation.
The Imaging Science Foundation, founded by Joel Silver, and the intent of the Imaging Science Foundation was to lift the quality of images throughout home and industry. And to do that, Joel worked at several ends of the spectrum. One which was, of course, the domestic side, providing training for calibrators to go help people set up their TVs. Yep. Then with manufacturers and with studios, so that whilst there was a standard that went from the beginning of the production of an image all the way through to the reproduction of an image, was there a process? Were there people who could help in creating that, so that what you saw at the end was what was there at the beginning? And so that's where ISF came.
Well, the famous line is trying to get exactly what the director intended for you to see.
Yep.
And by doing that, obviously, calibration is a very complicated thing. Andrew's been teaching me very slowly how to do it. It's not easy. There are lots of courses at different levels. I think they're up to level 3 now of ISF calibration. And obviously many tools and a bit of history of tools. Some are massive compared to what they've become these days. But we can probably go through. I think the first thing we'll do is go through some of the tools. And I guess some people have said to me in the Facebook pages, how do I know that my calibrator's essentially doing the right job? How do we know that he's got the right tools? What tools for what? Especially now with the whole laser, a lot of these projectors that are laser. There's some people still going around using equipment that technically doesn't actually work on a laser projector.
Yep.
So Andrew. Please.
Okay, look, I'll try and be as quick.
This looks like a serial killer's table.
Yeah, I'll try and be as quick as I can. There are two fundamental sensors. There is a colorimeter and there is a spectroradiometer, and they have different ways of reading light. A colorimeter effectively uses filters, and a spectroradiometer generally has like a receptor, like a chip, as a rule. It's a very loose description. One tends to be perhaps more accurate, one tends to be a bit faster. And so what we tend to do is we use a spectroradiometer and reference that to a colorimeter, and then we use the colorimeter for the calibration. That's one thing. Going through what's on the table, there's a couple of things which I couldn't find today, but for those of you who know, I started off with the Sencor Color Pro 3 and 4. They're just like little pucks. Then I've got a Color Pro 5, which is drifting around somewhere. But a lot of you might be familiar with the good old Datacolor Spider, or the Spider TV. This still exists. That's
literally dangles in front of the television.
And that actually has come onto a later version, and there's a new one out in the market now. So these were used more perhaps for people who did photography or for calibrating their computer monitors, but in the early days this and versions of this were used on TVs and projectors. Starting off with the Datacolor 3, the Color Pro 3 and 4 and 5, the Spider, and then this is an i1 Pro. This is the original version, spectroradiometer, still very accurate.
Same thing in front of the TV?
Or in front of a projector. It can be used either way. Sure. Some of them you had to take some filters off the front of. My first big investment was this one. This was called the Hubble, or the OTC 1000, depending on who was actually selling it. This is technically a Sencor OTC 1000. This is a colorimeter, really great for projectors. The Spider 5, which is a unit that you need for things like your JVC projector for doing an internal calibration on your JVC. This is portrait displays, SpectraCal C6 colorimeter. This became important because it was an entry-level priced unit for TVs up to 2000 nits. So the problem with a lot of these is they're not necessarily good up to a high nit level. So once you get into HDR, if your calibrator hasn't got the right tools for high nit levels, assuming you've got a TV with a high nit level, then you need to make sure he's got that. Then you start to play with some of the big guns. This is a Jetty SpectraVal, a high-end spectroradiometer. The reason this is important is this can read the very short wavelength of lasers. So laser projectors have a very, very narrow wavelength of the blue laser, and so you need something like this to accurately read a laser. And then you would reference that with the Klein K10, which is another colorimeter, but a super accurate and super fast one. So these two together become the weapon of choice for a really serious calibrator, and to ensure that you can do lasers, and to ensure that you can do the really high-end calibrations, and also super accurate. But all of this comes at a price. I haven't added it up, but we're probably looking at something in the vicinity of $70,000. I haven't done the exact maths, but in Australia, these three, you're looking at $30,000. That at the time was, I think, around $11,000, and so on and so forth.
Adds up.
Yeah, it adds up pretty quick, so you've got to be really dedicated. Now, none of these are worth anything if they're not calibrated themselves. Now, in Australia, one of the problems we've got is it can be hot, and these filters in these are subject to heat. So if the calibrator's left this in the car, then your calibration can be off. If it's been dropped, the calibration can be off. These are supposed to be calibrated every 12 months, and often they have to go back to the US to do that, or you have to find a certified lab in Australia who can calibrate your tools. So each year you'll find the calibration dates marked on the side of our equipment to know that our equipment is valid. Otherwise, you're just taking readings and you don't know if they're correct. So that's the sort of evolution. If you've ever seen that, evolution of man from the ape to Homo sapiens, that's kind of what you're looking in terms
I think we're going backwards now.
Calibration tools. A calibration tool is pointless without a test pattern to generate the patterns that we need to read the result. Now, the most common test pattern probably is disk, but the problem with that is trying to advance through test patterns on a disk as a professional calibrator takes some time. So you go and buy a test pattern generator. This is an original Sencor Video Pro VP401. Still bloody good, but for Rec 709. But this is still very much a valid unit.
Very reliable, I must admit.
No, it is. And this has some test patterns in it that I truly love, and it has some features that you actually don't get on some of the other calibration tools. So this actually still sits in my kit, and when I'm doing Rec 709 calibrations, this can be as valid a tool as anything I've got. Then you step up. This is the VideoForge Pro, which is produced by Portrait Displays, SpectraCal Calman company. The advantage of this is it's a fairly compact model. It's easy to carry around. It can give you information about EDID and data coming from your display. However, one of the downsides of this is that they have locked this to the Calman software. So if you are using Lightspace or some other calibration software, you can't use this, which is a setback. You're locked into the one product. But I do use Calman, and Calman and Lightspace are two probably the most recognised professional standard products on the market.
Is it fair to say that most calibrators will be using Calman?
No, probably not. I don't know the numbers in the market, but Lightspace is just as valid, and they have their strengths and weaknesses. The workflows in Calman are very good. Accuracy in Lightspace is very good. I wouldn't want to sort of criticise either of them, and I think each has its application.
Like anything, yeah.
So, and then finally, this is the new beast on the block. This is the AV Pro Meridio 7 generator. The one before this was surprisingly called the,
What is it, Andrew? Can you repeat that?
the
It's a
Avitro
mouthful.
Meridio 7, and the model before it was surprisingly the 6.
Six.
This is a dual-purpose signal generator with test patterns. It has ability to load patterns into it. It has an amazing array of connectivity on the back. It has the ability to generate some audio test tones, and I'm very fortunate enough to be working closely with these guys on especially developing the audio side of this, so that it will shortly in the future provide us all of the Atmos test tones that we want to validate systems.
And that's I'll give a testament. That's Andrew, where he's so good at what he does and so passionate that we tend to annoy everyone else by going a little bit deeper than what everyone else does, asking questions, and then even companies going, well, that's a valid point.
Yeah.
Why don't you help us, develop that?
Yeah.
And that's what this guy's doing at the moment.
So,
We tend to try and better even our own knowledge of what we know and what he knows, because he's Yoda, but just a lot prettier. And that's just a testament to Andrew and how good he is as a calibrator and as a
Gee shucks.
person.
So look, the thing is, as a professional calibrator, the absolute minimum you should see someone using, I think, is one of these, or the i1 Pro 2 is one of those. You really
Is this a bit dated though?
Oh yeah, so the dated stuff. Let's just put the dated stuff away. That's dated,
But you're over there.
Yeah, but the new version of this is definitely valid. The i1 Pro 2. But they really should have, we'll just put that aside because that's really just for JVC projectors in our use. They really should have a spectroradiometer and a colorimeter together, and there's several reasons for that, and I'll get into that. That's the absolute minimum they should be using, the updated version of that, and a professional really should be using these tools here,
Especially with lasers.
With lasers, that's almost a must-have. So, good tools. The tools must be certified each year, every 12 months, and you should check and you should ask to see that they're certified. That is in its own an expense. And in Australia, carrying around in the back of your car, there's a good chance that they could be out of calibration. So, why do you need two? Well, as I said, first of all, you profile these against each other. But for what a lot of people don't realise is that OLED displays have a different perception of colour. And so what you may not know, and what your calibrators should be doing, is profiling displays but using what they call a Bodner profile. Now, I know this all sounds very technical, but at the end of the day, if they do that properly, then the calibration on the OLED should look a lot better, but also it should also be used to match other displays as well. There's also there's another calibration which I won't go into, but you need to know these things to know that you are properly calibrating your displays. If you're going into a studio and doing that work, or if you're doing it in a home and you want the OLED to be perfect, etc. So you've got, is it an LED light source projector? Is it a laser light source projector? Is it an OLED TV? Have you got the tools for the job? Is the tool rated for the lumen output or the nit level of your TV, and so on and so forth?
How accurate? So you actually test that against that and that against that, kind of checking them to make sure that they're talking
so each
the same
year
language.
these get calibrated, and then
when you rock up to a job,
so this is more precise generally. So what we do is we take a reading with that, then we take a reading with that, and then a table, a profile is created for this. Then that is generally put aside, and then this would be used for your calibration. If this is being used alone, then you don't really know. The advantage of this is it's a bit faster than this would be, and generally at lower light levels. So same thing, that I do with this. This would then be used to create a profile for this, and then this is used because it's very fast, which speeds up our calibration process. But also, as I said, you've got to make sure the right profiles are used. Now, moving on to something really important. Can your calibrator get your calibration right, and what is involved in getting a calibration right? I think that's the really important thing.
I think a lot of people kind of go, well, how do I know that I've got the right calibrator, or how do I know my calibrator's doing the right thing? Because people are flying blind here. That's why they get a calibrator. And granted, in Australia, there's not a lot of calibrators, and if you live in Queensland, there may only be one person near you the other person's too far away, or so we are a bit forced sometimes in Australia to use certain things on certain people, and that's okay. And I'd like to think that majority of calibrators in the country are doing the right thing. But I think, again, how do we know?
Yeah, look, and in
question.
fairness, you have to be calibrating all the time to be able to put out the money to afford these gear. I appreciate that. It's taken me a long time for us to have the budget to do this, and a lot of calibrations. You can't start today unless you're very well off, maybe sell your Ferrari or something and buy this sort of gear. So, that's why I'm saying some of the more, the entry-level stuff still performs, but again, not for lasers or some of the other profiles. But how do you tell? Well, first of all, here's something really important. Calibration is not guesswork. Behind me on the TV, you can see there's a table of numbers, and they have the coordinates for white, red, green, blue, cyan, magenta, yellow, and 100% white. These are fixed color coordinates. They apply for Rec 709. They apply for DCI and P3. They apply for BT 2020. There is no room for calibration by eye. That's not how it works, guys. So if your calibrator is saying, I'm just going to tweak this by eye, then, that's not correct. Now, there is room for some eye adjustment when it comes to luminance matching the environment of the room, right? And that is very much set to some degree by eye. But setting your primaries and secondaries, this is what
to me,
you
that's
need.
a bit concerning, considering there's this much equipment needed, and there are calibrators going around by eye. So, and that's a bit scary.
We're talking about the CMS numbers, especially the coordinates of your color space. So it's really important to make sure that, all of this is here for accuracy, right? So getting your calibration done right, making sure your coordinates fit. Now, having said that, a lot of TVs and projectors don't reach 100% of their capability. They don't always reach 100% of that color space. And if you're interested about color space, check out the video. We'll put up a little tag here, and go and have a look at that information on color space, because that's really important to understand. But yeah, it's...
and we've done a video about how Calman works. Andrew did one recently, so we could probably link that as well.
Yeah, so, there is... Calibrators should not be tweaking stuff by eye. So if they're doing the red, green, blue, cyan, magenta, yellow, and they're adjusting it by eye, that's not on. That's not the way this works. And you need to understand that color space, and also the graduations from the scale from white to red, white to green, and so on and so forth, and the saturation of the colors. So there's a lot involved, but yeah, so the things to look for are someone who's qualified, who's done ISF level 2, for example. There is another organisation out there. I would say find someone who's been calibrating a long time, shows that they're serious and they're invested in what they do.
Passionate. So we're up to level 3 now, though.
Yeah.
ISF. But I mean, look, not everyone obviously could have made maybe the last one that was last year, so level 2 is still okay.
Yeah, but level 3 really deep dives into HDR, HDMI, and the expanded color space. There's a lot more depth of knowledge in there. But when you leave the course, I remember finishing my course and sweating bullets on my first calibration. I actually went back and apologised afterwards, because it's the first time and you're shaky and nervous and you don't know if you're doing things right. You have to do a lot of self-education and training as well. But that's kind of it. So have you got the right tools? Have you got the qualifications? Have you had the experience? Have you been around for a while? And look, also cut your calibrator some slack too. Often,
it's not an easy job.
Well, the thing is, how many different types of any one brand of TV are there?
Yeah. Right?
Models have been around a long time. How many different types of displays are there? From plasma to LED to QLED to OLED. How many types of projectors are there and different light sources? How many now color spaces have we got? How many different gamma settings have we got?
Different menus.
How many different remote controls are there? How many different menu configurations? Companies don't use the same names for the settings. So if
everyone has a different screen material as well.
So if your calibrator sometimes is scratching his head, bear with him, because there's a hell of a lot that he has to consider. But the fundamentals are right tools, right experience, right qualifications, and running by the numbers. That's the way it works.
Yeah, and I think, again, a lot of people kind of say, well, it's a big investment for the client. Calibration can be anywhere from I don't know, $500 all the way to $2,000, even more, depending on how big the job is and what's
Combination of
involved.
things, yeah.
But most of the time, I guess the most common question we get is, what do I get for my calibration? So you always get a calibration done for Rec 709, which is your Blu-ray type movies. Then you got your BT 2020, which is your 4K. So there's always 2 calibrations that are done. In some instances, Andrew has to do more because there's a day and night feature.
Yep.
There's one for Dolby Vision if it's on a TV.
Yep.
As well. So depending on how many calibrations are being done will determine obviously the price of the calibration.
Yeah, and there's different types. So there's the manual calibration and there's the automated and LUT calibrations. If you took one of the new LG TVs, they have a built-in calibration for SDR, for HDR10, for Dolby Vision. Works very, very well, by the way. But you could then do a calibration for SDR, a calibration for HDR10, a calibration for Dolby Vision, and a calibration for night and day on each. So that's 6 calibrations. Now, yes, that does have an automated process, but still, you need to make sure that that automation is happening properly, and you still have to be there, and you have to, as enthusiasts, if you want to calibrate, then yes, you're probably looking at this tool here. I think these are around 700 and something US. Yeah. You do need a color source of some sort. There's a lot of different options. And then you can buy a cut down version of Calman that is licensed for your TV. So if you've got an LG, you can buy the LG one. If you've got Panasonic, you can buy the Panasonic one or a Sony one. It'll only work on that TV. And you need that, and then you'll need some kind of test pattern if the test patterns are not built into your TV, which is becoming more and more common. So, in theory, $700 US roughly could kick you off, plus the cost of your software. So you're looking at about $1,000 maybe US to get you started with the kit. Then make sure you know what you're doing. But then you can keep calibrating your own system, and we absolutely encourage that. And then from there you go, well, if I don't want to go through the learning curve, then you've got a professional calibrator as an option.
Unfortunately, what we find, and what a lot of people say to us, we were never offered a calibration. Do we need it? Yes, you do. No calibration, no projector, no TV, no display comes out of a box ready to go. No car leaves a factory without it being tuned. You can't build a house without engineers' drawings. There's always something that needs tweaking, and we need to do this in that environment, particular if that room has windows, if it doesn't have natural light, blah blah blah. We have to control the space. But again, it's a product that needs to be offered because there's a lot of people. I mean, just the thought that there's people out there with $100,000 cinemas, they've never had an audio or video calibration done.
Never been
really
optimized.
scary.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
you
really...
spend all that money on gear and it's not performing at its limit. That's
Yeah.
crazy. And to be honest, someone asked me the other day, which is better, a $5,000 TV with a calibration, or do I just spend my money on a $10,000 TV? And I'll tell you, all day long, get the $5,000 TV or whatever and get it calibrated. That's a better investment for your money than, now, okay, I'm a calibrator. Am I saying that to line my pockets? No, absolutely not. Because I see the results, I see the difference. And your TV should look like glass. It should look like a window that you can reach into with a massive depth. And more so, we just did a video recently on Lumigen, and this is an absolute must-have because you cannot optimize Lumigen without this. So look, I hope that's answered some questions, given you a little bit of information and interest on calibration. Any other questions?
No, I mean, again, we had a customer recently, Andrew was just mentioning it, that ended up could only afford $3,000-4,000 on the TV and bought a $2,000, well, actually no, it was cheaper than that, and spent the rest of the money getting it calibrated, and that TV's come out great. I think the one question we get the most is, how do I get a calibration done? You can Google ISF Calibrators Australia. A lot of calibrators fly under the radar. They don't advertise a lot, so it's mainly word of mouth. We're based in Perth, and we are predominantly doing a lot of work here in Perth. Obviously, with COVID, you did used to fly a lot around Australia and overseas, Singapore and New Zealand and Japan and all that. But there are some fantastic calibrators here in Australia. Tony O'Brien in South Australia is a fantastic gentleman. He also writes up for StereoNet. Ken Burrows in Sydney is another one, and there's
obviously some brilliant guys in America. Chris Deering is one of the legends in the industry. Jason Dustle and so on and so forth. So and there's many others that we don't know. But we will gladly, if you send us a message, we will do our best to connect you. You can look on the ISF website also and look for calibrators in your region. I'm not sure how up to date that is. All right, guys.
I think that's it. Any questions, please fire them away. Or if you have had your room or projector or TV done recently, this might give you a little bit of insight on what you've probably just had experience. Any in-depth questions, please comment. Andrew's always checking the comments, and we do our best to try and respond to everyone. Sometimes there's a lot of comments. But yeah, again, thank you very much. Subscribe, hit the notification bell. Always get stuck on that tongue twister.
No,
and we'll be releasing some more videos. And please remember, we do have some other videos that are linked to this, which talk about how calibration works in depth. Andrew's sitting there on the computer and the color space and all that. All right, so I'm sure we'll see you in our next video.
Cheers. Thanks for watching.
Bye.
Bye.